Let's see who is next on my magic screen. Jamie.
Jamie Doggett, White Sulphur Springs.
Great, welcome. Elsie. Elsie. So let's go ahead then with other people who are attending, staff members and etc. Jenny.
Jenny Stapp, State Librarian, happy to be with you.
I'll let you guys kind of work yourself down.
Evan Hammer, Montana State Library.
Genevieve Lighthizer, Admin Assistant.
Who will be introduced officially momentarily.
And this is Melissa Briggs, Central Services Manager.
Pam.
Pam Henley, one of the consulting librarians.
Welcome. And Bryce.
Sorry
Here we
about that. Bryce Maxwell, Program Coordinator at the Montana Natural Heritage Program, who is a corgi owner for life. I grew up dog sledding, but we always had corgis in the house. So
excellent. I guess you know, corgis are livestock and they require some herding.
Actually, they think that the world requires herding. They're the herder.
That's true. Elsie.
They are the boss.
Elsie, I'll catch you.
Yes, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Boy, I tell you, everybody is working double duty. So good to see everyone.
I'm sure you are working double duty, actually. Sharon.
Good morning. Sharon Hardwick. I'm the HR specialist with the State Library.
Good morning. Amy.
Good morning. Amy Marchwick, Montana Shared Catalog Lead System Administrator at the State Library.
Good morning. Welcome. And Ashley.
Good morning. I'm Ashley Canich and I'm an accountant at the State Library.
Welcome. Jennifer.
Morning, I'm Jennifer Burnell, Montana Memory Project Director for the State Library.
Joe.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Flick. I'm your CE coordinator at the State Library.
Lovely. Thank you. Welcome. Jessica.
Jessica Edwards, Data Coordinator, State Library.
Welcome. And Kara.
Hello, Kara Orban, Consortia Director at the State Library.
Well, lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you all for joining us. Did I miss anyone in the process? Jenny, then may I turn this over to you for introductions of Genevieve?
Yes, I'm so happy, and I'll let Melissa jump in as well. Genevieve Lighthizer started with us just after the first of the year, replacing Marlis when Marlis left us to go to the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education. She has just jumped in with both feet. She's obviously working with this commission. She's already helped support meetings of the Network Advisory Council. Will be supporting the Montana Land Information Advisory Council as well. She's been providing support for phones for our talking book services. She's quickly coming up to speed on all of our administrative processes and finding opportunities to improve those services and create efficiencies within the organization already. So I don't think we could have found a better person to jump into this position, as is the case with our other new employees having to do this remotely while we don't necessarily have a chance to work directly with one another is an added challenge. And Genevieve just seems to be fitting in so well. So Genevieve, we're very, very grateful to have you with us. Welcome to your first commission meeting.
Thank you.
Welcome indeed. Do you have a speech prepared for us?
I do not.
Good. No. Well, welcome aboard, and I hope that you really gain a lot from working at the State Library. It's, in my view, one of the last of one of the great last public institutions on the planet. It's a great place.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to Genevieve for the mask.
Yes.
Oh, good. You got that. Great.
Nice.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank
and
you.
the handwritten note was a nice touch.
Yes.
Yeah. Who is that mask, ma'am? Jenny, just for clarification, we have 5 bullets on down through the bottom of the trust agreements review under consent agenda. Typically, my experience with the consent agendas is that we hit these just very lightly before we deal with them. We see if anyone wants anything pulled from that consent agenda to be treated separately. My read of this is that we would basically hit the first 5 items fairly lightly, first 5 bullets fairly lightly, and then vote to approve or disapprove. Is that your intent?
Exactly, Bruce. And if I may just make a couple more quick updates before we get into the consent agenda.
Sure. So do you want to, okay.
I wanted to let you know that Mary Craigle is not going to be with us today, so we'll work to bring her to your April commission meeting. We still need to have the discussion about the impact of the differential privacy on our public library state aid process, but Mary can't be with us today. So again, we'll try to bring her in April. And then if you don't mind, before we get to the consent agenda, we also have one more special announcement that we wanted to make right at the start of the meeting. And I'm going to ask Evan to share that announcement.
Perfect.
Thanks, Jenny. Just wanted to share with you all that I believe it was just last week, the days are blurring, last Wednesday, at the annual conference of the Montana chapter of the Wildlife Society, the Montana Natural Heritage Program received the Bob Watts Communication Award. This award is presented for significant communication, excuse me, in media such as professional publications, popular wildlife articles, books, movies, or videos that have a relatively wide audience. And then, if you don't mind, if we have a minute, I'd like to share the nomination letter.
Please.
I'm nominating the Montana Natural Heritage Program. They are responsible for acquiring, storing, and providing reliable information and expertise on Montana's native species and habitats. Natural resource managers, including federal, state, and tribal agencies, NGOs, as well as private citizens, all have access to the most current species lists, with focus on species of concern, conservation status ranks, biology and management information, statewide wetland and riparian mapping, land cover, land use, and habitat disturbance mapping. This information is disseminated to the public via a user-friendly website in the form of spatial data and/or publications, and is used to make informed decisions. MNHP also proactively offers training in the appropriate use of this information. MTNHP is nationally recognized as one of the best of over 80 natural heritage programs. There's a little more beyond that, but sincerely, Joanne Dullum. Joanne is a inventory and monitoring GIS data manager with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and a TWS member since 1997. So very excited for this honor for our heritage program.
Well, gosh, Evan, Bryce, Jenny, it's in some ways sort of expected that people would see what a terrific service it is. Congratulations. That's great. I am really proud to be associated with the heritage. I just think it's just fabulous. A source of I use it all the time, and it really does set a standard. Well done. Well done. These are good additions to the agenda. Keep them coming.
That's it. But congratulations, Bryce, and to all of your staff. Incredibly well deserved. I understand that the nomination was made. Evan had a hand in helping with the nomination, but the review committee accepted the nomination unanimously.
Well, it's just wonderful. Well, let's look at the items in the consent agenda then. Does anyone want to take and pull anything out of the first 5 bullets on your, following Jennifer's bullet, the next 5 bullets on your agenda? Pull anything out for separate discussion? Hearing no request to pull one of those bullets out. Anyone have any additions or changes to the minutes of December 9 or December 18?
I'll move to approve.
We're gonna actually wait to
Oh, you're gonna do it as a bunch. Okay,
we'll
sorry.
do them as a bunch, but hold that thought. Do we need to say anything more about the second quarter financial report, Melissa? Everyone's had a chance to look at it? Any comments about the bylaws reviews or the duties of the chair or the vice chair for the commission? And finally, did everyone have a chance to read through the trust agreements, the trust documents, our responsibilities, their responsibility? Are we ready to have that signed? Jenny, do you want to say anything about trust agreements?
Just as I noted in the memo that the trust board has also reviewed them. And so with the commission's annual adoption, we can sign them and have them in place. We did extend the dates out for another year, so to give us more time with documents.
Any further discussion about any of these 5 bullet items under consent agenda? Do I hear a motion to accept or reject?
I'll move to accept.
Thank you, Kenning. A second?
I'll second.
Ken? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Sorry, I.
Okay, there you go, Connie.
I was
Aye,
just
aye, aye.
saying
More
it in my
coffee.
head.
More coffee. All
I did
opposed,
want to
nay?
say thank you for making those documents so clear. I think they're very well written and straightforward without, extraneous things in them. And
Thank you.
Yeah. All opposed? Any abstentions? So because of great, so the consent agenda passes unanimously. So what I'm going to do is, if I don't hear an objection or an abstention, and I hear nothing but ayes or nays or whatever, I'm going to assume that that's the full vote, because we don't have any means at this point of registering votes except through the chat or through some of the other tricky Zoom stuff, but which we're not using, if my understanding is correct. So this is approved. Well, thank you. Moving to legislative update, but nothing's been happening there, right, Jenny?
Not a thing, not a thing. I wanted to cover mostly financial updates for the commission. And if you have any other questions about pieces of legislation, as I've been sharing updates these past weeks, do let me know. Some of the bills that we've been watching are now tabled and likely dead. Others are still continuing through the process. So again, if you have specific questions, I'm happy to take them, but I wanted to focus most of our time on some of the financial implications of the legislative session so far. I feel really good about where our budget stands. House Bill 2 has been acted on by the Education Subcommittee and will be heard in House Appropriations next week. So Section E, the education section, is up Wednesday morning, the 10th. And I feel like we're in a position to just go to the Appropriations Committee and thank them for the great work of the Education Subcommittee. I don't feel like there's anything missing or needed in our budget at this time that we would ask for in future hearings through the legislative process. And that's a really good place for the state library to be. The Education Budget Subcommittee, as you know, acted on all of the recommendations from Governor Gianforte's budget. Those include our statewide present law adjustments, increases to our fixed costs to help with some increases in those costs, especially for IT fixed costs. They acted to approve the authority to spend the new fixed cost, which was recommended by the Legislative Finance Committee. Again, that's a fixed cost that would be paid by those agencies that utilize our GIS and natural resource services. that action includes an increase of $117,000 over the original pass-through dollars that the state library received from those original 5 agencies that helped to fund the natural resource information system. There was some questions from the legislators to the budget office about the fixed costs. You'll recall that the Legislative Finance Committee had recommended that the governor include 2 fixed costs in his budget. One to help fund the GIS and natural resource services, and a second to help fund the open government and state publication services of the state library. And that recommendation was that all agencies paid into that fixed cost. That recommendation was not enacted in either Governor Bullock or Governor Gianforte's budget. The response from the budget office was that it was largely a matter of timing, that this request came so late in the budget preparation process that it was difficult for them to act on. They had the starting framework for the GIS NRIS fixed cost that was applied. But I feel like the response leaves the door open for us to have future conversations with the legislature and with the governor's office about an additional fixed cost for that state publications program of the state library. So again, that's not in the budget now. I think there's opportunities for those discussions in the future. The fixed cost that is enacted, it's a modest increase. It's not everything that we asked for when the budget was being built, but it does also create a framework for us to continue to make sure that we're requesting and receiving adequate funding for those services from those agencies. And then a couple of other additions that were made to our budget beyond what was requested in Governor Gianforte's budget. There was some one-time only general fund dollars added to the state library budget to fund a service called Newsline. Newsline is a program that's administered by the National Federation for the Blind, and states have to pay for that service and be state partners in order for residents of a state to have access to their services. The National Federation for the Blind records newspapers, including daily newspapers, in the state where there is that state program sponsor. And then persons who are blind or low vision can call into the Newsline service and listen to the daily recordings of those newspapers. This is a service that has been offered off and on in Montana. One time, probably more than a decade ago, the state library was a sponsor. We had some one-time only grant funds to fund that service, and then it ended. Most recently, the Department of Public Health has been the sponsor, but their program sponsorship ended a few years ago. And so residents of Montana have not had access to this service now for at least a couple of years. So with this funding, we'll be able to be that program sponsor. Largely, it involves just simply funding the service, but the funding that the legislature appropriated also includes funding for training and marketing. And so we'll have conversations with the Federation about how we might go about helping to promote the service, what ideas they have. Certainly we want to promote it through our patrons, with Montana libraries. I've already had conversations with the Montana Humanities about helping to promote the service and so forth. And I think it'll be a good way for us to promote the services of the Talking Book Library as well. So again, one-time only money, $60,000 in general fund. The idea being that we have a chance to prove the value of the program during this next biennium. And then the second addition to the state library budget is authority to spend dollars within the Montana Land Information account. If you look at your second quarter financial report, you'll see in the MLIA account a large increase in the last several months in the land information account. Some of those dollars were there. We've had a balance in that account now. for quite a while. We want to have a healthy balance, but a balance that does not continue to grow and grow unspent. We want it to be a cushion for lean months and lean years. About a 6-month working average is what we're targeting. We had a little bit more than that going into the year. And then we think we're in a COVID bubble with all of the housing activity related to people moving to Montana during the pandemic that's causing that large spike in collections into the account. And so after looking at that large spike with the finance committee with Jamie and Bruce, we contacted our Chair Beatty as well as the budget office and suggested that the budget subcommittee grant the state library authority to spend some of that money to help to launch the statewide real-time network. That's something that we talked with the commission about several years ago now. By way of background for those of you who might not be familiar with the real-time network, and others on the meeting are more familiar with the technology than I am, but essentially it's a series of GPS repeater stations that communicate together and provide access to centimeter grade survey data that can be used for a wide variety of purposes, including surveying for infrastructure projects and development, precision agriculture, utilities deployment, autonomous vehicles, and other kinds of services. We were approached probably 3 years ago now by members of different tribal communities as well as the Department of Transportation about hosting the real-time network and supporting it for the state of Montana. This is something that, in addition to talking to the commission about, has been a recognized priority in the land plan for a couple of years now. We knew it needed some one-time only investment to get off the ground. There are pockets of these networks being developed in certain areas around the state. For example, different tribes have received grants to start to deploy these networks. We've had an operational network in far western Montana that's been tied into the state of Washington's network now for a couple of years. They want to boot us off their network as quickly as they can. And so this will give us an opportunity to do that. So what the legislature has approved is authority to spend about $925,000 over the biennium, $426,000 each year of the biennium from that Montana Land Information account. These are existing dollars, they're in the account. It's a state special revenue fund. It's for this specific purpose and one-time only authority. So we're really excited about the opportunity to have the ability to spend these dollars in a way that will address a significant concern that's been expressed by our stakeholders now for several years. We think it's a great use of these monies because we do think we're in a bit of a bubble and don't expect collections to remain at this level. So it makes sense to spend these dollars for one-time only purposes rather than ongoing expenses. This gives us a way to right-size that account and make sure that we're leaving an adequate cushion, but not too large a cushion in that account. And then also importantly, as we talked about with the commission a few years ago, looking at models that exist in Utah and Washington, there is the potential for a source of revenue to come from this real-time network, where people who need access to that real-time data could pay a subscription to have access to the network itself. And the legislature is very interested in trying to offset some of the future costs for this program through that source of revenue. And then as we talked with the commission about a few years ago, we would also collect and manage that data in more of an offline, not real-time manner and make that data available really through our information systems for anyone who needed access to it but didn't need the real-time nature of that access the system provide.
So Jenny, this has been an unfunded priority of the Land Advisory Council for 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
Now that the legislature appears to be going to give us, knock on wood, basically the authority to spend those monies, well, which appear to be in the account. Will this move? Will we see this again? The commission see this again in the form of requests for purchases, or a more sort of coherent, not coherent, but ready, shovel-ready projects and those kinds of things?
I think you will. The first steps are to hire some staff, and we're still very early in the stages of thinking about the exact kind of staff, whether we'd hire a contractor or FTE or what we would need. And then from there, there'd be an investment in technology and infrastructure, the creation of an actual business plan to move the initiative forward. We've made some halting attempts at those efforts in the past, so some of those pieces are at least in preliminary existence, but again, without this kind of investment, we haven't had the resources to move anything forward. And so I think much like we bring you work on our LiDAR plan and our 911 plans, we would bring you a real-time network plan.
Thank you. Ken.
Sorry. It would be interesting in the future to find out a little bit more about those other, the potential for those user fees for the services, because since it's a real-time network, as I understand it, I mean, I don't know how you log in and authenticate in order to do that, but if there was a way, versus, the way we used to do it years ago when GPS first started is you'd have to download a file, come back to the office, and after the fact, post-correct the data to get it. But this is happening in real time. And I'm just conjecturing here, but you could think of some incentive things that could happen with that would, if there was a user fee associated with it, there might be a structure to that was a sliding scale, so that if, as an example, someone was developing or putting more broadband in an area that needed it, that had very low, high demand, but let's say the disadvantaged users or something that couldn't afford it, you could incentivize someone to do that when they're doing the surveying or a telco marking out areas of structures where they're doing their infrastructure. So I wondered how much flexibility you have, or whether that's just a one-time user fee for everybody. It'd be interesting to know more about that. And I assume the library would, I don't know if there would be a separate commission or something that would control that, or whether the library commission would handle that kind of thing. I know that I'm familiar with the program in Utah, but I don't know how it works. So
I think largely it would be up to us to make those decisions, and we would bring that back to the commission.
Okay.
Ken, could you be prevailed upon if there became an opportunity for commissioners to work with staff to explore this? Would you volunteer to be that commissioner?
Sure.
And there may
I'm
be
somewhat limited. I've got one more meeting as a commissioner, but I'm happy to do it or to contribute after as well to help with for the greater good, because it's quite important way to leverage. And I mean, compared to the way we used to do it in the old days, it's pretty amazing to be able to do this in real time as you're out there working, or as the surveyors out there working and developers and such. So yes, I would.
Well, I think that you're a good counterbalance to me. If it doesn't look recognizably like map librarianship, then I kind of dig my heels in a little bit. So you and I can work together to temper each other's excesses.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Jenny.
And then, well, I think those are all the updates from House Bill 2 that I wanted to share. Are any questions about House Bill 2 before I get into some of the other pieces of funding legislation? So tied to one of the actions in House Bill 2, the reduction of the coal severance tax authority, is House Bill 347. That's the bill that would backfill any revenue shortfalls below the level of authority with general fund to make sure that we have cash to spend during the biennium up to that level of authority. So a reminder, in House Bill 2, the level of coal severance tax authority with action from the budget subcommittee was reduced from about 567,000 by 10%. So reduced by about 56,000. So a little over 500,000. Our reminder, our coal revenue that's come in this year is estimated to be somewhere around 420 to 430,000. So this biennium, or this fiscal year, we're short probably about 130,000 in actual cash, and we've planned to just not spend that from the start of the fiscal year. So we're not necessarily in a position of having to make cuts in the middle of the fiscal year, but there are things that are just going unspent because we knew we didn't have that cash coming in. Even though we'd have a reduced amount of authority because of the action in House Bill 2, with the funding, if House Bill 347 passes, we would anticipate that we would have somewhere around $90,000 or so more in cash to spend in the next two years than we have this fiscal year. Does that make sense? That bill has passed the House and will be referred to the Senate Finance and Claims Committee. The one amendment that was made to House Bill 347 was the addition of a 2-year sunset. So the legislature will revisit this bill again in the next session. Lots of talk during the hearing about the need to revisit coal and what declining coal revenues means for the overall state, or something that we've heard now for several legislative sessions. So I hope that they'll take that need very seriously. There are a couple of other studies proposed, including HJ6, that calls for a study of coal revenue and its uses. House Bill 49, the Land Information Act recordation fee legislation, cleared the House and is scheduled for a hearing in Senate Local Government on Wednesday, March 10th next week. So Wednesday will be a busy day for us. And then House Bill 50, the 911 funding legislation, also cleared the House. It will be referred to Senate Energy and Telecommunications, but we don't yet have a hearing date. I just really want to thank Chair Beatty and Representative Garner for their able sponsoring of those two pieces of legislation. They were excellent sponsors to work with. I also really just want to thank our staff. Staff were available at a moment's notice to provide me with good information for the hearings, to make sure that we and the sponsors were really well prepared. They were very helpful in answering questions from stakeholders, participating in those hearings, sort of giving me confidence as I went into those hearings. So Evan and Melissa and Michael and Aaron and Tracy and Kira and Jessica and others who've been so helpful through the first half of the session. I just really want to thank all of you.
And Elsie and I had a chance to watch that process and hear your testimony. And speaking for myself, I thought you did particularly well and were particularly adroit and gracious in answering a lot of the questions that came at you. So well done, very well done. Elsie, do you have any comments about that process?
No, I'll put my legislator hat back on and just I think we got great committees and they're asking thoughtful questions. But Jenny, you're the rock star, And, just your delivery is just calming, and it's just what they need to hear. And, they're going to need that continuing more going forward as well. So no, you did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank your staff.
It was very different this year. I've been over to the Capitol once. I know Elsie's been over there quite a bit more. Participating online is different. The budget hearing itself felt very different. There's such camaraderie when we all go over to the Capitol together the morning of the hearing, and I really missed that aspect of the hearing this year. I also just wanted to make mention of LC 2877. That's the broadband study resolution that we've been working on with the Montana Library Association. Senator Pat Flowers has agreed to sponsor that legislation. It will get introduced after transmittals. Study resolutions have different deadlines for the legislative process. This is again the study that calls for a broad-based look at a wide variety of policy goals and legislative opportunities to help support broadband deployment in the state. There are a number of other broadband bills making their way through the session. Most of them have relatively targeted policy goals, and some of those will likely make their way through the session. Others are not making their way through. We think regardless of the outcome of those bills, that there is this need for a broad-based study that can take a more comprehensive look at all of the different needs and opportunities and how they relate to one another and how they can interplay to help support better broadband in the state. We have been hosting a bi-weekly broadband coalition meeting, just a quick check-in with stakeholders to keep everybody informed about the legislative process and to hear comments and concerns. I think that's been relatively successful in bringing stakeholders together. So I'm encouraged by that. At this point, we're not hearing any concerns about the study resolution. So I don't think Senator Flowers will have any concerns introducing it or carrying it forward in the remainder of the session. Again, that would be a study that would be enacted during the interim by the legislature themselves.
So, Mr. Chair and Jenny, I've been visiting with the new director of Commerce, and they're very interested. I don't know if they are part of your broadband coalition. You're shaking your head, so hopefully. Yeah. We also know that if indeed Congress, with their continuing resolution to fund government, there will be dollars that will be flowing to our state through the governor's office, also through our office for enhancing any kind of learning that may have been missed or disrupted during the last school year. But in visiting with the new director, looking to see what dollars we could use and help in aiding all of our rural communities. And every time I've spoken to him, I've talked about my role on the State Library Commission so that we can enhance our patrons wherever they might be. And, we are, just on another side note with that, we are going into our second year, and I do believe at this point it's going to be embraced in House Bill 2 to do a, how do I want to say, a 4-year-old, but more of a family literacy, and also in math and reading and in science for a device that's given to the family, and then the family then interacts with it about 15 minutes. There's great data that comes off of it. It's a partnership with Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Idaho. But because of that rural nature and the underserved part, looking at the library federations to also help in making sure that we can get our families to read more, to be engaging more with what school might look like. And we have had about 250 families right now. We are mostly in eastern Montana and across a little bit the High Line. We are also in tribal lands. So it's a great partnership, but I am very hopeful that we'll be able to enhance serving all of the patrons of the library, of our families and our children with more broadband. And the study is part of it, but there will be dollars that will hopefully for implementation of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned Department of Commerce. They are working with Department of Labor to convene a broadband stakeholder group, not just state government. I know they're including the education community, OCHI, economic developers. They're actually meeting right now this morning. So we're not able to be at that first meeting, but I really look forward to working with them to address really a lot of the questions that are brought out in this study bill as well. So I think there'll be really good opportunity for broad-based conversations about the needs. And as you so well articulated, so many opportunities. I always liken it to a patchwork quilt, but we need people to come together to bring that patchwork quilt together to address these concerns. So love to learn more about your program and how we can work together to help support it.
We'll watch for that. That's good news.
Yeah.
Elsie, do you have any,
Go ahead.
this is Ken. Elsie, do you have any insights on, it looks like I just read in the paper that House Bill 422 was voted down in the third, it was fairly high in the first couple votes, but was voted down. And do you have any insights into that?
All right, you're good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, going through that. So Ken, you know, as a legislator of 12 years and 6 sessions, and now in my 3rd session here, I don't know the numbers. If you could give me the general title, that would be really helpful. What was the general title, Ken?
Well, I have to, hang on. It was a broadband bill for, I have to look it up. I'm not sure.
Was
I
this
don't remember the numbers either, so I can relate.
Included municipal networks?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
You know, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Ken, going through what I've got my talons in is about 130 education bills that deal with tax as well as with broadband. This one, we didn't go in and testify or do anything for that, but I can look that up and give a rendition of what that might be. You said it was House Bill what?
I think it was 422.
Great.
Jenny,
do you have any idea on that one?
I do. I know the education associations and the Montana Library Association chose not to support that bill. Not that municipalities like Missoula and Bozeman don't have their own broadband challenges, but those challenges, they're not seen as great as the challenges in rural areas of the state. And there was concern that the model that was being proposed really wouldn't be something that the more rural communities of Montana with lesser resources would be able to adopt and implement. And so it really wasn't seen as legislation that would move the needle in any significant way in rural areas of the state. I know the sponsor had interest in trying to create some public-private partnerships. The telecommunication providers themselves were very concerned about overbuild in areas that were already supported with broadband, and concerns about using taxpayer dollars to do that kind of overbuild. So those were the concerns that were expressed during our meetings of the coalition that I mentioned.
Do you anticipate that will be discussed in the interim?
I do. Yep.
Sounds good. Yeah, I didn't have an opinion really strong one way or the other. I was just, it was interested. The reason I mentioned it, it was, it had a role for Department of Commerce, and which they've been involved in broadband in the past with federal agencies and such. And so it was, aside from the public-private partnerships in the larger communities, you know, I know I don't know, nobody's really addressed it that well, but there are some consultants out there. There's one in Helena that has done quite good work with community anchor institutions, but they're not a traditional telecommunications company, so they're, you know, they don't have the sort of clout that the telcos do in the political process. But so it's kind of interesting. And in my own opinion, I read through it briefly and thought, there's probably more discussion needed for that kind of thing. But rarely do people talk about the barriers of cost. And I know it's a significant. We have probably about 50 very good telecommunications companies in Montana that are anchors in their communities and pillars in their communities. But it's very, very costly to get broadband in a lot of these rural areas because of the distances traveled. But
it's costly, and it's
more discussion on that in the future.
And just to be
clear, the other
Senate Bill 297, the bill that involves Department of Commerce and has some grant funds for build out, that bill is moving forward. So
okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're all aware that broadband is everyone having access to sufficient bandwidth and devices to access their libraries and their schools and business centers is incredibly important for Montana. So I'm glad to see that there's going to be a bill going forward, or a study process going forward, rather, to take a look at this maybe a little bit more holistically and both identify the needs and also perhaps some of the optional means for getting this done. I think that we have at the State Library a really huge stake in making this work because we are a digital library. And if people can't get to us, then, what is the sound of one hand clapping?
Right.
So I think it's really important that we get this right, sooner the better.
I think, Bruce, I would only add to that something I haven't heard yet is that I feel like it's an ethical obligation if you're offering more as a public service online and yet not giving people the way to access it. I feel like that may be a dilemma for organizations. It's like saying there's a book over there, but you don't have the ladder to reach it on the highest shelf. It's like,
right.
I think it's an obligation for public agencies that are creating more online content.
Content without access is no content at all, he said contentedly. Any other questions or comments regarding the broadband? And Jenny, do you have any other legislative updates you'd like to share?
those were the updates I wanted to cover, unless there are any questions from the commission. Or Superintendent Arnson, if you have any other points you wanted to raise.
It's just that everybody's breathing because it's transmittal.
Yes.
I mean, everybody is looking at study bills right now and they have to have them by the 85th day. So we're working on some things with school elections. We're working on some broadband. We're also, I have just as a simple update, we have 41 million that the federal government gave us for COVID relief for schools back in June. I deployed that. The governor's office gave 85 million to schools that had to be encumbered and spent by December 31st of 2020. I received 170 million that the legislature has embraced. So we're going through lots and different meetings right now because they are sharing with me, telling me what to do with 170 million. Now, I'm a Montanan and I don't really like to be told what to do, but I also honor the legislative body. So we also know with a continuing resolution that Congress is having that we'll know by the end of the month, the prospective amount of monies that schools will be receiving is over 400 million. And the due date on all of these dollars, besides the governor's, is Fed fiscal, which is start of October of 22. So there is a lot of dollars that's coming in to support schools, and they're very fluid. I think the partnership that we have with the library on literacy, that we can enhance even more, working through broadband and not just cable, but extending what does that mean? Not just giving devices, but what we load on the devices. It's how do I say, it's a whole new world. And normally we give out about 800 million in general fund to schools. So they are receiving almost that entire same amount that's coming from the federal government. So we're working really diligently here. And you know, God gave me this job and he also gave me COVID. So I think we can laugh and we can enjoy the sadness that the virus has given us. And by saying enjoying, meaning we have to reflect and we have to remember, because everyone has been touched by the virus. But there's also joy in the opportunities that can come from this, because our education system is changing. So how we read, how we serve people, how we serve our patrons at the library and our rural communities as well as our urban, it's going to look different. So we need to be creative, but we need to be direct in our manner of how we serve. So that was just my little speech at that point. And I don't know if that enables anybody's help, but I'm going to come back to the word breathing, because they'll be back on the 8th of March. And we're still in finance meetings. So Jenny, you got out of those finance meetings. I'm still in them. And I might throw a lifeline, because we are in Zoom. And I have sat in the back of those rooms, you know, personally myself, because Zoom does not hit it. These are my colleagues, these are my friends, and there are also our policymakers that are holding these dollars. So, you know, I'm that 5th grade teacher in the back of the room that's watching. So anyway, thank you for this simple moment to share.
Thank you for sharing. I think that's terrific. Yeah, I think with all the challenges that the COVID business has brought to us all, I think it's also brought us opportunities to rethink how we address our basic mission, and we're all doing the best we can. It's encouraging to hear that there's federal money perhaps flowing through this fine state to make our classroom safer, and we all depend on those kids getting educated, because they're going to have to take care of us, right? The last item in this part of the agenda is just noting that we have a new legislative landing page.
And that link just includes all of the materials that we've been preparing related to our budget and other pieces of legislation. It was a request from the legislature that agencies create these landing pages to have a single point of contact for all of the information and communication that's occurring about budget and legislation. So just wanted to make sure that the commission also had access to the page and the kinds of content that we're sharing there.
So as this Zoom meeting goes forward today, I assume that sometime around noonish we'll take a break for lunch. Would the commissioners prefer a kind of that we call a 5-minute break for personal needs, or will people just get up from their desks and take a personal need break when that occurs, and we'll just sort of move forward? What's your preference? Ken,
I like both.
Like both? Okay. So we'll take a break around 11 o'clock for personal needs, but by all means, we're all adults here. Excellent Library Services Award Criterion. This is an action item, and sounds like Tracy and Pam are going to present information about this to the commission.
Tracy is not here this morning, but I am here to answer any questions you might have about how we've done this process. We had several public comment sessions. I think all of that's in the memo that you have. So I'm just here to answer any questions that you might still have.
Pam, could you just highlight a couple of the changes that are in the recommended award criteria from what the commission saw in December?
Yeah, I can do that. There was confusion about, we have the recommendations and then we have the open question, and a lot of the confusion was, does that mean you have to do the recommendations and the question or not? So we went ahead and put in nice bold letters and, so you know it's 2 recommendations and the open question. And people liked having the open question as a way to explain some of the things that they're doing. One of the other changes that we made was perhaps as we put this award out next year is providing some examples of what do some of these recommendations, what would be good examples of these recommendations that people are trying to meet, giving examples of what's a support group, and some of the other things that are listed in there. So that's pretty much all I can say about that right now.
And Jenny, if I understand this correctly, what we'd be voting on is basically approving the recommended changes to the ELSA awards and into the process. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
And do you have any reservations, or do any of your staff have reservations?
No.
Any questions to Jenny or Pam regarding these recommendations? Do I hear a motion to approve or reject?
I so move. Jamie Doggett.
Thank you, Jamie.
Second.
Kenning, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the changes recommended in this agenda item, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you for all your work on this, Pam. This is great.
Well, thank you. I think the committee is going to be very happy that you have passed this, and we're looking forward to putting this out next year and seeing all the things that libraries can report to us. So I think this will be a nice improvement on the award. Thanks.
My sense is this is one of those possible silver linings out of the whole COVID thing, is that we've had a chance to rethink what an excellent library is and the whole process. And hopefully this will help us all move towards excellence.
I just wanted to share quickly an update on what our plans are for the ELSA award for this year, given that MLA will be virtual. For commissioners who aren't familiar with that process, libraries go through the application process, and we review those and make those awards to libraries that qualify under the standards. We will bring to the commission at your April meeting the list of award recipients for your review in April. And then typically during the awards luncheon at the MLA conference, the chair of the commission announces those recipients, and all of the recipients receive a certificate from the state library. This year, because of the virtual nature, we're planning a virtual slideshow with information about the recipients, rather than that kind of reading out in that way, because the awards luncheon won't happen.
I hope in future commission meetings, you'll share whether this turned out to be a wise choice or perhaps it had some flaws, and whether we need to make some mid-course adjustments. But this is great. This actually is a result of a lot of work, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Jenny, if you would lead the next agenda item about the Network Advisory Council reboot, maybe starting off with just a real super brief how we got here and where we're going.
You bet. So commissioners will recall that starting last fall, we began to think about reimagining our services under the umbrella of the idea of the Montana Library Network. We've had discussions in previous meetings about the history of the network, how it kind of fell away for a while, and the needs that we see to bring back those concepts and what they might mean for how we view our services holistically. We've had conversations now at 2 separate NAC meetings, the December commission meeting, work sessions with the commission, as well as 2 separate meetings of the different work groups and executive committees that help to advise us on the Montana Shared Catalog, Montana Library to Go, and some of the other collaborative work that we do. Again, the idea behind the Montana Library Network is that all libraries, recognizing the needs of their communities, can invest in a set of core services, and those core services are identified and prioritized by the Network Advisory Council with input from the library community. And those core services are the services that we as the state library then identify for investment of our financial resources and the time of our staff. And in that way, we hope that through those services, we're meeting our mission and goal of providing sufficient library and information services to all Montanans. Some of the problems and challenges that we've been faced with over the last several years have led us to this way of thinking and this proposal. And I want to largely capture the overall nature of those problems by saying that I think we need to be better about being future focused. We are in a world that is dynamic and rapidly changing. Our communities are rapidly changing, and our libraries need to be able to change with the needs of our communities. And I don't feel like our organizational structure right now has allowed us to be as proactive as we might be to understand and adapt and adopt library services that reflect those kinds of changing needs. And so the hope with what we are describing through the core services and a regular holistic evaluation of those services with the oversight of librarians who are truly subject matter experts in those areas, and a group of Network Advisory Council members who are really those future focused thought leaders for the state, advising the state library and the Library Commission. I hope that we can be more proactive and more future focused. Some of the questions that we've asked ourselves in recent months about how the pandemic has shaped our library services. How, when we have opportunities to spend stimulus dollars, we can invest those in the most strategic ways, are examples of questions that have really challenged the state library staff. And I don't believe that our current organizational structure with the advisory groups that we have position us well to ask those questions in a way that give us the kind of proactive insights that we need to feel like we're answering those questions effectively. There are a number of other opportunities that I see addressed through this kind of model that we've discussed and that are described in some of the documentation provided for you. Did want to draw your attention to the sort of organizational chart that is provided in the MLN oversight document. This is very much a draft, but what it's intended to convey is that there is this Network Advisory Council that identifies and prioritizes sort of a suite of core services. And we've provided some examples here. They are just examples. You need to go through the process of vetting what those services might be.
Can you pop that up on the screen, please? Can you pop that chart up on the screen, please?
Go down to the MLN oversight, Genevieve. Thanks.
Thank you. And pardon me.
Sure, thank you. Good question. Again, the Network Advisory Council's responsibilities would be to, in communication with the library community, identify that suite of core services. What is provided here are the services that we've been discussing in meetings. Some might fall off this list, others might get added to this list, but this gives you an idea of what those services might be. As is said here, the core services are intended to be looked at holistically And it's the NAC's responsibility to help prioritize those services, give us a framework for thinking about the services, evaluating the services, helping us to be future focused in our deliberations about what these services and service models might look like, what kinds of platforms we should be thinking about, and so forth. And then each of those core services would have a group of subject matter experts that were going through the work of thinking about those kinds of framework questions that would be posed by the Network Advisory Council, so that we know what the service models look like presently, what they could look like in the future, what near-term and long-term opportunities we have to continue, as I said, to be future focused and consider how these services should adapt and change over time. In that way, they should be helping us think about how effective our service delivery is right now, where there are gaps in service delivery, how changes in technology and user demands might change those services in the future. They should help us to understand how we should be evaluating our success in delivering those individual services, and whether or not we are currently successful, what barriers exist to successful delivery of those services, and so forth. All of that kind of work comes in close communication with the library community, but as I said, is really driven by those subject matter experts that are deeply invested and deeply value those individual services. I think that the conversations that we've had have all been positive. I think largely the concerns that we've heard are just making sure that we create opportunities to hear from the library community, make sure that everybody has a voice. And I think in this way, we believe that we will actually bring more voices to the table than currently exists in the organizational structure with the Network Advisory Council and these other groups. We can bring together the voices of the people who might be deeply passionate about cataloging, but don't have the time and the interest to serve on a Network Advisory Council, or are deeply passionate about collection development or thinking about how we can support literature or the humanities better in our libraries. So that kind of thinking is built into this model. I think the biggest point of discussion that remains is whether or not the NAC should continue to be a more representative body of different types and sizes of libraries and geographic areas, or whether it should be a smaller group of librarians. And similarly, if we should continue to make use of, for example, the Montana Shared Catalog Executive Committee in looking at the library management system core services. This is a point that we've discussed at length with staff and with these different groups. And our staff's way of thinking is that the NAC needs to be smaller, it needs to be nimble, and it needs to have future focused thought leaders rather than just a largely representative body. And so that's the recommendation of staff to the commission for the makeup of the Network Advisory Council. And then similarly, thinking about the subcommittees to support these core services, our experience is that we get more results when we are working with a group of staff who are passionate and committed to the work of those core services, and we give them real work, as opposed to, again, a representative body where some people may have interest in the service, others might just be appointed to represent a group of people, but not necessarily understand exactly what their role might be. And so I think in that way, we really are talking about dissolving the current makeup of all of these individual committees and recomprising them of people who are interested in volunteering for specific work. In some cases, that work will be ongoing. In other cases, that work will be very time-bound. Ad hoc committees that are formed to address a specific project or a specific need, and then dissolved when that need is addressed. So the recommendation for action today, I'm happy to answer any questions, but the recommendation for action today is that the commission direct staff to go through the process of reforming a revised network advisory council. We would work with the current NAC to identify the specific job description for the new network advisory council and the kinds of knowledge, skills, and abilities for NAC members that we would want to see. And then if the commission takes this action, we would bring to the commission at your April meeting a slate of nominees to serve on that network advisory council. And then in your meeting materials, we've laid out a longer timeline for the next year of the action and work of the Network Advisory Council to begin to implement this model of the Montana Library Network, starting with finally prioritizing those core services and bringing a recommendation for those core services to the commission in August. We would then seek volunteers to serve on these core services subcommittees and really begin the work of describing and evaluating and planning for the future of these core services going forward. Might be a little ambitious, but my hope would be that by this time next year or a little bit later in the spring next year, these core service subcommittees have gone through the work of thinking about, for example, the current and future costs of these services so that we can begin to plan for how we're addressing funding needs and budgeting for these services with existing funds.
So I think now, if it's okay, Jenny, it's a good time to ask for questions or comments or discussion. And not to put you on the spot, Connie.
I was just unmuting myself.
Okay,
So.
great. What do you think?
I love it. I tend to want more efficiency anyway, and I feel like this would be much more efficient as well as rewarding, and we'll see a lot of results. I do have a question, just knowing what I know about transitioning people and getting buy-in, pay-as-you-go thinking. I agree that a smaller, smaller group of people who are passionate about a subject matter would be forward-thinking and move us forward. How will we also have other people come along with us and make sure that we are, if not having a physical representative from all the different areas, how are we going to make sure that we're representing different needs? And I'm sure you're thinking this through. But that's one thing that comes to mind that I think we'll have to be able to, we will need to be able to answer as you send this out to everybody.
We've just,
that's all.
Yeah, we've just started drafting sort of an evaluation framework for these core services. Again, this is something that I would want the NAC to think about and refine, but one of the elements of that framework, I think, is communication. That's definitely a need that staff and others have raised. You know, who are the target audiences and what are the key messages and opportunities for feedback, and making sure that we're creating opportunities for that kind of dialogue. I think that's one of the key criteria to help us think holistically about these services.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It strikes me that the commission will be receiving, once this gets, the train gets moving down the tracks, presuming it does, the commission will be receiving some fairly focused asks from this community and through this structure for services and et cetera. And I'm thinking that will be good to inform us. I have a process question. Do you believe that we've left anyone with hurt feelings or feeling left out or unappreciated or et cetera, et cetera?
Not that I'm aware of. I've heard from people that they just want to make sure that we continue to create opportunities to involve everyone. And as Connie said, make sure that everybody's been heard. I haven't heard of any hurt feelings, and we've been focusing a lot of attention on some of the leaders of like the Shared Catalog Executive Committee and the Montana Library to Go Executive Committee. And I think they all see opportunities for people to work more efficiently, as Connie said. So I'm not hearing hurt feelings there. I don't know if other staff are hearing differently.
Jenny, this is Kenning. I'm also supportive of this. Steve Jobs was famous for really questioning why certain people were in the room at meetings if they weren't directly contributing. And while I don't think we want to quite adopt that style, I do think that our default in libraries is to be as representative as possible in our committees. And I don't think that always serves us well. That said, I also do agree with Connie's concern about making sure that there's some happy medium, that people feel that they're heard and that their interests are represented. But I am supportive of this.
Thanks, Kenny.
Other commissioners, do you have questions or comments? Any other discussion regarding this item?
I think that the point that I would make is if the commission takes positive action today, we want to hear your thoughts and comments about the kinds of knowledge, skills, and abilities, for lack of a better phrase, of the kinds of people that you would want to see on the NAC. I think it is the intent for the commission to be involved in seeding the NAC. And so it's important for us to make sure that we have your input on the kinds of people that you think would make effective NAC members.
Do I hear a motion then to?
I have a quick question. Sorry, Bruce.
Oh, good. Good.
What would that look like? Is that a process you would take us through, Jenny, or do you want feedback just proactively from us?
I think both, but between now and your April meeting,
okay,
we would go through that process together. We have a meeting of the NAC next week to start those conversations with them.
Then do I hear a motion to then, do I hear a motion in regards to this agenda item?
I don't know the wording, but I move to accept, approve. What would you say?
Perhaps the recommendations, staff recommendations regarding this?
Okay, yes, I move to accept the staff recommendations and moving forward with this.
Thank you.
Montana Library Network.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Any further
Again, I'll
discussion?
second that.
So motion to approve from Connie, seconded by Ken. Any other discussion? All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. And abstentions? The motion passes. Well, thank you very much. This too is the culmination of a lot of work, both by staff and from the library community as a whole. And I particularly appreciate that we're trying to move this down forward in an age which is so networked, so connected, it strikes me that libraries need to be connected to work efficiently and effectively, and to make sure their users have sufficient library services. And I think this is this holds the potential of significantly helping us sort of to keep that promise to the people we serve. So I really appreciate that. I think this is good.
Maybe I'll share a link with you. A good friend of mine, the state librarian from Hawaii, Stacey Aldrich, is running for ALA president, and she's launched a podcast. And I encourage you to maybe listen to the first episode in her series, where she interviews a connection to her family who was a programmer for Atari early on. And he likens the changes in our communities and the changes we see in libraries to some of the Hindu gods for creation and maintenance and destruction.
Vishnu.
And identifies the need certainly to for people with all skill sets, those that are more creatively minded, those people who are necessary to help us think through how we sustain and maintain our current services, and at times the need to just destroy what we have and start over. And I've been giving that particular conversation a lot of thought as I've been thinking about the opportunities that I think are in front of us with this different kind of model. I'm personally really excited about it.
I look forward to seeing that link. Let's take approximately a 10-minute personal break. So we'll meet at 5 after 11. We'll resume, but we'll what we're calling, we'll temporarily adjourn, not adjourn. We're just taking a break until about 5 after 11. See you in about 10 minutes.